really happy to be here to talk to the audience a little bit about, what was our cloud journey look like at McAfee. And I think it's interesting because certainly, we're a cloud computing company. So a little bit of my background, Kim filled you in, but I've got to play a lot of technology leadership roles. I've been a CTO, I've been a CIO, I've been a CISO. And so, I think one of the things that I'll quote one of my favorite guys, Steve Jobs. One of his quotes was, "Hey, looking at the future, you really got to look and connect the dots backward to understand where you're going to go." And I think, the experience that I've had, transforming, from a mainframe programmer to all the way to what we're doing today, moving to the cloud, we've seen this journey and these transformations happen multiple times before. When we started to network computers, when PCs came out, then when we started to connect those networks up to the internet, and now we're moving out to the cloud. And I think what you learn from these journeys is that everybody arrives at the problems at different times, but all the technologists face a problem. So I think it's good to be storytellers to each other so that we can share our journey, so we can learn from them. And I think as you think about cloud and as you query other people and how they do it, I'll use another Gretzky quote is, you start to learn to skate to where the puck's going to be instead of where the puck is today. And I would say the state of cloud security in cloud today is developing, but still pretty nascent. And so there's some things that you definitely have to consider. But you also can't be stuck in the past and say, well, and I've talked to a lot of CISOs in my role here at McAfee. I help the sales team out a lot, and you hear a lot of them say, we'll never get out of our data centers, or we'll always be hybrid. And I would just tell you, is probably just not true, especially with everything that happened with COVID. I think more and more companies are realizing that their data centers might not have the same importance as they did before. And so, I'll throw one last quote before we dive into the slides is, as Einstein said, we can't fix the problems of tomorrow by using the same techniques that we're thinking today. And so I think that's really how you got to think cloud as you go into it. So diving right in, let me tell you how it started at McAfee. When I came on board at McAfee, I'd been kind of like Kim, I have a soft spot for it. I've been a customer for about 17 years, and I've been on their advisory board for quite a few of those years. And as they'd spun out of Intel, and Chris Young brought me in and said, "Hey, we're getting ready to go public. We kind of got to get some things, under control before we do that." And when I looked at it, we had a total of about 97,000 workloads. And actually, it was probably closer to 100,000. And it was spread all throughout the gamut, where we were doing some things in Azure, we were doing things in Amazon, we were doing things in Oracle. We had a whole bunch of SaaS applications out there. So we were using ServiceNow and Workday and Salesforce. And then also, we had servers that were managed by IT, and we had servers that were managed by the business units themselves. And so, we kind of had a configuration mismatch. And so there was just a very heterogeneous environment that we were trying to get our arms under and our arms around to control. And so the way that we presented it, and I think it's important that we go through how we sold the cloud journey to the organization and then how we secured it. So we had 12 data centers across the globe. And I think this is not, unusual for a lot of organizations is, hey, you've acquired things through acquisition or whatever, and you never really brought all the data centers together, and suddenly you're having, it's not just a data center floor space you're playing for, your duplicative hardware, you've got over allocations in most of the data centers, you got telco costs and all that. And we also, we had a lot of tech debt because we had so much hardware. About, 75% of the stuff that we had was 5 years or older. Then we also had a lot of BU managed data centers where there were 41 like micro pops across the board where they were trying to be close to the customer. Instead of looking at cloud technology, they were doing it through colos. And we had a big run rate on that. And then even then, we still had multiple instances of cloud environments. So we were running our CASB product out of Amazon. We were building some new things in GCP. We had an arrangement with Oracle where we were building some things in OCI. So we were really all over the board there. And then we also had a lot of experimentation labs that were like 500 across the globe. And we really hadn't moved to the cloud like we should have with these to virtualize it and spin them up and spin them down. So imagine those servers and those hardwares is always running instead of us being able to bring them up when we need them and tear them down when we didn't. And so that was really what we sold it on is, hey, we're going to go and do software-defined strategic data centers, right? We're really going to rationalize and consolidate down to, we thought we were going to consolidate down to a couple in the US, maybe one in Europe and one in APAC. Turned out that we're really going to try to consolidate down to one, and cloud will be our backup everywhere. And all that will really be running our data centers. We do have a few appliances that we sell and things like that, and you got to have some physical hardware around that. But everything else, we're really trying to virtualize. And so we also needed to have a big rationalization effort of why do we have a lot of the stuff that we have? Because like most companies that are 20, 30 years old, you've acquired a lot of stuff over time and you never really get rid of it. And so, we really had to think about how we did it. And two, it becomes an asset management problem because a lot of times we would discover servers and say, hey, this has got a vulnerability. Could we shut it down? We didn't know who the owner was. We didn't know, how to get there or whatever. And so, it was really turning into something that we really need to get our arms around. And so what we did is we said, hey, before we dive right in, let's perform a dispositioning exercise. And it's really important that you do this. Is it does two things. It drives culture of, hey, guys, we're going to cloud, like it or not. We're all going, it's time to come, and you got to bring it along. And we get to sit down with them and say, okay, of all the applications that we have today, which ones are business enabling and they run across the entire organization. That's really important to understand because as you're doing that, you can decide, wow, those might be the things that I need to move last because they have so many hooks. Maybe I have some large apps or some medium apps that just support maybe a department or even some processes in a department. Maybe I can move those first because they're lower hanging fruit, lower impact, right? And two, I think as IT and security, like we had to move ours first. If I can't convince everybody that all my stuff is going out to cloud, then why would they want to come along? So we sat down and we did a big exercise around this. And we also did a whole lot of, hey, let's just not even bring this, let's kill it. So, a great example I can use is at one organization I was at, we were doing an Oracle ERP move out to Oracle Cloud. And we found this application is called WebGL. And it's like, hey, what's WebGL? And it's like, oh, it's a general ledger application where I can put journal entries in and it goes into Oracle. And it's like, well, if we're going to Oracle Cloud, why wouldn't we just go directly into Oracle and make those journal entries? And they just never considered it. It's like, well, we always had that app. We thought we needed to bring it along. So it's a great time to rationalize what you're doing and kill it. And we all know complexity is an enemy of good security. And so it's really a chance to simplify and define your environment better, right? And so after we did the disposition, we did what was called a value framework. We had to go and sell it to the organization. And so what we said is, hey, let's look at the total value of this is, okay, we're going to have reduced cost of ownership because we won't have as much hardware. We can spin things up, spin them down. There's a risk impact, but there's a cost impact, which turns into our net savings. And so the addressable spend is if you look at everything that we had on premise, and you went ahead and you subtracted the cloud run costs and the on-prem costs, you get your target operating state costs. And if you do that and subtract away your one-time investments, which is the migration and modernization, the exiting of the data center and the change management process, and there's a hefty change management process to go full cloud, that'll be your total value. Oh, by the way, we also found some strategic benefits out of it. We sell a lot of software, and so we create go-to-market partnerships with Amazon and with GCP. As we moved more workloads over there, we said, hey, we also want to become better partners. I had much better cost transparency and control because I knew who all's doing what and what accounts. And so I can actually push the cost of goods sold to the right owners instead of doing a peanut butter spread allocation across the enterprise. That's a very important sell to the CFO because they get a lot more transparency in what they're doing. And then I think most importantly is we got a whole lot more faster time to innovate, better agility, and a lot more resiliency as well. And so, we had much better techniques for bringing things back to bear when they needed to. And so all in all, there was a lot of value to be sold. And so, like I said, I hear it all the time from other CIOs and CISOs is it's just more expensive to run stuff in the cloud. And it's like, it absolutely is not. It's more expensive if you just move your data center to the cloud. If you reimagine the way your whole organization works, like vulnerability management is another good example. Before I had a team of 7 or 8 people who were doing nothing but vulnerability management because we had so many workloads and, the new threats were always coming out. If you build it right, hey, when Patch Tuesday comes out, I create the new golden image. I bring a few servers up, see how it works. And then I burn down all the old ones as I'm bringing up the new ones. And so you really got to start thinking in site reliability engineering principles instead of the old data center principles. So it does take a big mind shift to go, right? And so, as we started the cloud movement, then came the great black swan event of COVID-19, right? Which sent everybody home. And so, and why we're doing this event virtually instead of in person, right? And so, and we thought when we were going to send everybody home, we closed all our offices worldwide and said, hey, we're going to shut down for 90 days. And then, we thought, hey, they'd flatten the curve and everybody come back into the office. And we all know that didn't happen, right? And so, luckily, McAfee, we had people spread across the world. So, I had people in India and Ireland and Latin America and Asia. And so we were pretty right-sized for the experience of going to a work from home model, right? But what we found and we didn't expect is that our vendors weren't. And so a lot of our customer support vehicles and all of that, really became a problematic issue where their VPNs were becoming overwhelmed and they couldn't help us support our customers. And so we very quickly were able to get with AWS and said, hey, can we stream this app through your cloud? In that way, we don't have to VPN them in or anything like that. And we got that done in about 2 weeks. And we sent it out to all our vendors, and then it made us really think through, like, okay, from here on out, why would we ever have them come on our VPN, especially if it's just servicing customers on help desk or whatever? We could always do that, and maybe a true laptop as a service, almost back to the Citrix Zendesk days, right? Of I'll just deliver it through the cloud, and in that way they can use it anywhere that they need to. And so we started thinking about not just for this problem, but where can we use it in other places, right? And so that became very important and made our shift to cloud go a little bit faster in those arenas. And then two, we did have some collaboration tool challenges, right? Because a lot of Zoom and Blue Jeans and WebEx and all that experienced a lot of outages when suddenly everybody was doing collaboration from home. But if you think back to where you were when this all started and where you are now, like, we live in Zoom and Teams and Slack a lot more than we did before. And in fact, to me, email becomes less and less important because it's just the new ways of work. And so, as we're thinking about, we recently did a separation where the McAfee consumer separated from the enterprise side, and we're going to merge with FireEye. Well, as we're thinking about building out new office spaces and all that, we're going to build it probably at 60% capacity, because not everybody needs to be in the office. So like, if you want to come in, great, you can, but you don't have to. And so really thinking through how are you going to use those collaboration tools, and what will be our ways of work going forward, are squarely going to be in those type of tools, and our ways of work won't ever return back to the way they were. So those are, some of the considerations that you need to have as well. So let's talk a little bit about how we thought about the move. So we had all the things on-prem, and if you look at this graph, it has two axes. One is, savings and time to value, right? And the other is time and level of effort. And that's really the balance that you got to go is some things you should just lift and shift it. And maybe you'll modernize it someday. Maybe you won't, just because maybe it's not that complex, or maybe it's too old a legacy system or whatever. Great, just lift and shift it. But then there are other things that you're going to want to lift and optimize, and also like move and improve. So maybe, hey, I'm going to optimize my infrastructure as a service things, right? But I really want to, move and improve the resiliency of my apps. Maybe I want to containerize them. Maybe I want to go serverless. How do you think about those? And there's a cost associated with those, but certainly it'll make your environment more resilient. And I would argue now that, cyber resiliency is just as important as cybersecurity. And so those are really two legs of the same stool anyway. And so you should be thinking about that. And then two, we are seeing is really new innovation in this space. Was in retail for a lot of years. I understand how that works. If you've never worked in retail, you want to update your cash registers, especially if you're a large organization. It can take almost 30 days to get all the cash registers upgraded. I know when I was at JCPenney, across 1,000 stores, we had 45,000 cash registers, right? It takes a long time to do that. Well, if you haven't read the article on it, you should. It's fascinating. Chick-fil-A went to Kubernetes cash registers, right? It's all containers. Hey, I can rebuild it in a flash. If I want to build in new specials or whatever, I just do it. And they distribute it through a Hive model, right? And so they don't have to have a lot of expensive hardware and servers in the store. It's actually pretty easy. And again, if something goes wrong, I just destroy the cash register and rebuild it. And in fact, there's no reason in the future that you couldn't rebuild the cash register after every transaction. And so the value of you'll never get malware on the register because I'm rebuilding it every time, unless it's in like a supply chain type attack or something like that. Imagine that security model, right? And so, it's really a good time to reimagine the work that you're doing, right? And so, what were the challenges that we faced, though? And so this is from 2018 Right Scale, State of the Cloud report. And so, it's probably a little bit stale on the data, but I think the sentiment is right there. The challenge is security. And I would argue the reason that the challenge is security, we're almost, it looks here like it's 78% are going, that's the biggest thing that worries me, is again, because we have a bunch of data center models that we're trying to move to the cloud instead of maybe just reconsidering our whole security paradigm as we go forward. And so, and I'm going to dive deep into some tools just to give you guys some food for thought on this, right? I think the other thing is managing the cloud spend. And again, the naysayers will always tell me that, cloud is just so much more expensive than running it on-prem. And it's like, no, it's not. There's a reason that, Okta and Uber and all those are cloud born. You can be much more agile, but you have to build with that thought in mind. So again, bringing the principles of how you ran your data center into the cloud just aren't going to work. And you need to think through how you're going to go ahead and attack that. There is a lack of resource and expertise. And that is something, but just like in the PC days, right? Like, again, I hate to admit, I started off as a COBOL and assembler programmer, and I had to morph my skill set and my career as I went along. When you do a big deal with the CSPs, you should be able to get education credits for your team. Take advantage of that. You should also, hey, when you do the big deals with the cloud, you should be able to ask for migration credits. They want to help you move to the cloud as quickly as possible. So ask for money to help make that move, right? Because if they get you into their cloud, that's a long-term arrangement. So the short-term investment up front isn't going to be much. And they'll also usually give you modernization credits. So if you say, hey, I have some stuff in the cloud already, but I built it a long time ago, hey, Kubernetes only came out in 2014, right? So maybe it wasn't even containerized when you built it. And so they'll give you modernization credits too to help things run more efficiently. So managing that spend and expertise, you can supplement that through the agreements with your cloud service providers. Governance and control, we'll talk about that a little bit more later. I think it's if you set it up with the end in mind, especially on governments, not everybody gets an account. Like you have one account administrator and they allocate it by cost center. That should be easy to do. Managing multiple clouds, that's getting to be easier and easier too. There's a lot of cloud tools out there that work in all environments, and so that'll help you on your journey. And I think performance, I can't imagine performance is a concern like it used to be anymore, because quite honestly, the democratization of both GPUs and CPUs, because of the explosion of crowd, it just makes it cheaper and cheaper as we go along. So let's talk about the whole reason we're here. Cloud security and the new abnormal, right? Is what are the things that should be top of mind? So let's not dive right into tools. Let's talk about what should be the things that are top of mind for you. And I think for sure, the first one is just data protection. This is where you're going to get yourself in trouble is, how do I protect the data that I have? How do I monitor the ingress and egress of the data? How do I encrypt it? How do I monitor who has keys to it? And it is a big problem, but there's a lot of tools out there. Compliance, you do have to worry about GDPR and all the emerging laws. When I was at the casino, Macau came out with their own privacy laws. Canada has their own privacy laws. Is there data adjacency issues? All those things. You need to be very thoughtful about that. But again, the CSPs have expertise in helping you solve these problems. They've worked with others to do it. Lean into their expertise. Unsecured APIs. This is the one that keeps me up at night a lot. Is, most services come with dozens of APIs already built in, most of which are set to open. So an example I'll give with you is one company I was at, we were doing a big analytics problem. We were going to fill up a Azure data lake, right? And so I said, hey, before you fill up the data lake, the access model that we want to this is since we're not having to give public access to it, it's our own internal analysis that we're doing. Let's set it up with two-factor authentication to get in, because boy, that's all our customer data, and we want to be super sensitive about that. And so sure enough, as they're filling up, our CASB starts blowing us up and say, hey, it's not all secured. And I'm like, well, what do you mean that can't be the case? Like, we told them, and I saw it, and sure enough, as we dug into it, oh yeah, they had set for the console, they had set up second factor authentication, but for every other API, it was just username and password. And I was like, well, why didn't you secure those too? And they're like, I had no idea we had APIs out there. And it's like, well, that's the S in ADLS, right, is data lake service. And they just weren't aware that all those APIs are out there. So, help your teams understand that if you're deploying a canned service, understand what the APIs are and how to lock those down, right? The use of open source. The Git repo, developers nowadays love to just pull code from the Git repo. And I totally understand why they would want to do that, right? but be very careful what they pull from, especially the public repos. What we're finding is in a lot of cases, that's where malware is getting embedded into this code. The threat actors are releasing code with built-in backdoors that other organizations are picking up. And so you got to incorporate scanning tools and static code analysis and all that into your CI/CD pipelines to really make sure that you take care of that. And then insider threats, like a lot of times the DevOps team is ahead of the IT team and the security team in developing things, right? And sometimes, you might not have a full view into their access methods, and you're going to want to have those. And they could inadvertently leave backdoors for themselves or purposefully. And so you really need to watch out for those things. So, what tools should you consider? And I think this becomes a little difficult as well because there's so many. So, I've listed here, we've got CASB, we got SASE, we got CM, we got SAST, CWPP, CSPM. Like, what does it all mean? And how should I consider it? And even more confusing, right, is most of the tools do overlapping work. So you really need to go into your tool selection with security outcomes in mind first, and then see what feature sets you're getting in the tools you're looking for, and are they covering those security outcomes, right? And so I think, what I would like to do is let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into, some of these tools and how they work. And that way it can give you a better idea of what I mean by that. So I'm going to use one of our tools first. It's the only tool I'll do. This isn't a product pitch. It just shows you some of the features of it. This is our SASE tool, which is Envision UCE, right? Universal Cloud Edge. And so it really started off is just a CASB. Right. And so it has all the features of an integrated CASB where, hey, I plug into the APIs of Salesforce and Office 365 and Box or whatever, and I can apply policy. And because I plug directly into the APIs, I can actually retro security policies too. So if I decide to enhance my security policy, it will go back into those APIs and look and see if you've have any violations of it and alert you to them and fix them, right? So that works as a standard CASB. But on top of it, like we'll do browser isolation. If something looks risky or you need some dynamic posturing or whatever, we'll isolate those applications in a browser. And that way, if anything detonates, it detonates in an isolated browser and it doesn't really get into your systems, right? That's a kind of a unique skill set or feature set for a SASE product. We also do, emulation and sandboxing. We analyze the MITRE attack framework. We tell you where's the best place to stop the attack that you're experiencing in your MITRE framework, right? How does it all work? And so that's a little bit unique to it too. And then we do pervasive DLP. So the policy that you set for your endpoint will be the policy that's set for your network, will be the policy that's set for your cloud. Not all SASEs offer that capability. And there's other SASEs on the market that compete with ours that offer different capabilities too. So it's really important that you dig into what am I really getting out of the tool. I think on your core network, the tools are a little bit more mature and we understand what we're getting with them. I'm not sure that that's always the case when you're looking at the new cloud tools, right? And so it's super important that you dig into the capabilities and understand what you're actually getting into. Let's go ahead and we'll go at the next slide. In this one, I think we'll show you just confuses the matter even further. This is from Gartner, so not going to go over the McAfee product. This is cloud workload protection. So, and if you look at this chart, the way to read it is, hey, the elements at the bottom are foundational elements. And as you go to the top, they're the nice to have elements, right? So if you look at it, okay, cloud workload protection should look for arbitrary code, look for embedded email, web clients, administrative privileges, do some log management, all those things. But, above that, we're seeing in a lot of them that they're also doing like memory protection, maybe some whitelisting. Here it says network firewalling and visibility, microsegmentation. Some of those do that. And then on top of it, hey, maybe it's like EDR, some behavioral monitoring, some threat detection. Hey, maybe even anti-malware scanning, HIPS, right? And so is it really just CWPP or what am I getting with that tool? And so you really have to do the research and dig into all the questions. And I would also argue that it's also like a cloud security posture management tool too, a CSPM. Some of the features that are doing that. In fact, I would certainly hope in the future those two tools merge together because they're all part of securing your CI/CD pipeline, right? But it's something that you have to be very cognizant is you're building your capabilities out of what am I getting with that tool, right? And then if we look at what else we're getting that's available to us that wasn't necessarily available to us before on-prem is, now the new buzzword is instead of EDR, we're doing XDR, right? Because we're doing more automated detection. And so now all the information from my network, my email, my endpoints, my cloud, all feeds up into a data lake service. It goes and does all the crunching. It does some AI, it does some ML, and it comes back and says, hey, here's some root cause analysis on the problems in your environment. Oh, and I know what threat actors are coming after you. So I took all your information from a tip, and now I can go ahead and feed your SIM, or I can feed your SOAR, or I can do automated actioning and all that. It's a totally different world. Again, the democratization of GPUs on the market, allowing these security tools to tap into that information becomes very important, right? And so if you're looking at the true, XDR tools that are out there, in a lot of cases, they're telling you exactly, the way that we've always done patching and vulnerability management before was, hey, it's Patch Tuesday. I know I got to hurry up and go patch all my servers to this new patch, especially if there's a critical vulnerability. Here's how we're going to do it. Well, the new tools are getting to the, hey, yeah, I get it. Patch Tuesday is important, but the biggest problems in your environment right now are this. Go fix this. And even better, a lot of them are doing MITRE analysis and say, hey, there's 15 ways to fix this problem. And so example, let's say you got a command and control server in your environment, and your first thought is, hey, I'll just go ahead and put a block rule in my firewall, and that way it can't talk out to the command and control. But what the tool might come back and tell you is, hey, the most effective way to do this in case it finds another egress point is just DNS sinkhole this, right? That's a totally different way to think about it. And more, the analysts, the threat actors are going to be using machine language to come after you, right? And you're going to have to operate at that speed. And that's not through our traditional security methods. And so, we're going to have to get comfortable with the new ways of work and really deploying tools like this that lay really good analytics on top of it is really, really important to building out an effective program. And lastly, back to moving our data centers to the cloud, right? Let's not forget directory services. And so, again, they not making a shameless pitch for Okta, but they have a very good product. And I'll tell you how we thought about it differently. The last two organizations I've been at is we all know Active Directory is an LDAP, but is the most non-extensible LDAP ever, because too much of your system analysis and your system administration tools are embedded in Active Directory itself. So you can never extend it, right? And so, but it always seems to be the source of the truth at most organizations, feeding all other directory services and that. We turned that on its ear at the last organization that I was at, and we're doing it again at McAfee, of Okta can plug right into my HRIS. That's the source of the truth for employee data. It becomes a universal directory. Oh, by the way, that is truly extensible. I can extend it with things that I need in it. And it feeds Active Directory instead. Because quite honestly, who's to say Active Directory will live forever, right? I think just as we saw, PCs replace the big clunky green screen monitors that we used to have on our desks, I think you're going to see other devices. Already your smartphone is doing a lot of that work. But, I think as more and more people work from home, the expectation is I'm going to do anything on any device anywhere. So, have a good authentication method, a well thought out strategy on this, challenge two-factor when necessary, and get out of the way when not necessary, right? And so, you really spend a lot of time thinking about how you're going to do your directory service. Just moving to ADFS or something like that might not get you the benefits you think it is. It's easy, it's comfortable, but it's a good time to really rethink how you're doing your directory structure in the cloud. Much easier place to embed second factor and any other sort of multi-factor authentication that you want to bring into the environment. And some, other blind spots for your consideration, right, is embedded secrets. The Git repositories are full of embedded secrets. People embed AWS session keys, SSH key pairs, Slack tokens. It really is a problem that you're going to have to, number one, I wouldn't let my development team, you can have a personal Git and you can have a business Git. Like, don't let those two paths cross. It shouldn't be a way that they're bringing code across, because when they start dumping your company's code in their personal Git, that's where session keys and all those things get exposed. And that's where you're going to get breached. You're seeing it a lot that the threat actors are scanning those repos, looking for your company's key pairs, your company's secrets. Don't let it happen. I've even seen stuff like hard-coded username and password in code. Like, you just can't have it, right? The other is, I think people really overthink the zero trust, right? And so, I was having an argument with another one of, my tech leaders at the company, and they're like, well, unless everybody has their own profile, it's not true zero trust. And yes, by definition, I guess that would be right. Zero trust would be everybody has a unique one, but you can narrow it down to enough roles where it's effective. But, complexity and imperfection doesn't become the enemy of good work and true zero trust. And then, another example I will give you that I'm seeing a lot of companies make the mistake on is, again, they build PAM or privileged access management into the way they think about their cloud production environment. And it's like, no, if any environment is going to be zero trust, it should be your cloud production environment. And when it stops working, instead of the administrator coming in and doing fixes to it, you roll back to last known good and you fix the problems in staging. That's where it belongs, right? And so nobody should have access to your production environment. And that's really just the CI/CD pipeline that pushes it. And that's the way you should think about it. That's how Google and Azure and all those are building their environments. It's how you should think about building yours. Turn on the audit logs. I know that sounds super simple, but the fact of the matter is that, in a lot of cases, they don't have it turned on. And so to make your security tools the most effective, they're going to need those logs in order to understand what's going on and what's going right. And so you really got to rethink that. Make sure that the configuration that they're choosing turns on the logging. There's also a whole lot of canned infrastructure as code out there in GitHub, right? GitHub, recently a security company came in, did a scan of 1,000 infrastructure as code configurations. And sure enough, what happened is 42% of them had at least one security vulnerability in the infrastructure as code. So people think that a lot of times, if it's published to GitHub or whatever, like it's good code. No, that's actually not the case, right? And again, back to worrying about supply chain attacks and all that, you'll find that this is normally the norm, is the canned code you found. I think this survey even did like Terracode configuration. So you'd think, well, that's, like how many of those are going to be wrong? Well, ended up about 32% of them had security vulnerability embedded into that. So you really got to watch these canned configurations. It becomes really problematic. And then lastly, watch out for your converged perimeters. Is a lot of you stay in this hybrid mode, or is a lot of people first start experimenting with cloud, they leave the gateways open. And you should really, try to keep those gateways separate, because it becomes a side channel vector, for your attacks. And you really have to watch out for that, because you could get yourself in a lot of trouble if you don't. And so, you should really rely on, especially if you're just making that foray, your cloud service provider should help you with some setup and integration dollars, and go hire a team that really knows how to set up your foundational elements well, with security in mind. And that will help you start off on the right foot. And then, talking about the emerging cloud technologies, we did talk about zero trust in that. And, I think you do have to keep those principles in mind, right? And two, I can't encourage you enough, rethink just moving AD to the cloud. And I know that's how Microsoft will push it, but there's better directory structures. There's always been better directory structures. And if you're going to redo it, now's the time to do it, when you're doing that. Really using intelligent security tools, right? And so what I mean by that is there's other really cool companies out there. Strike Ready, I would say, is one. Abnormal Security for email is another one. Abnormal Security, the way they work is they plug right into the Office 365 API, and they do analytics on what's happening with your email. We were able to discover tons of amazing spear phishing emails that were, as you can imagine, coming into a casino organization, everything where they're asking for, wire transfers and lease payments. And as we're doing buildings, a lot of, hey, I'm missing this invoice, send me money or whatever, that your traditional phishing tools aren't going to catch, because they're not doing sentiment management, right? They're using crowdsourcing to figure out what's good and what's bad. And so these new tools are really good. And again, like we have our Envision Insights, where I'll tell you exactly which things you should worry about first in your environment and how you should address them. It's like having an extra SOC analyst in your environment. And so those things are really important, and you need to look at those tools and figure out how you can use them in your environment. Securing and automating the CI/CD tool chain, I can't emphasize enough how important that is. We saw with SolarWinds how that became important, and how they had to be thoughtful about that. And so it really is an opportunity for you to really get in there, help put static code analysis in there, look for open source, do all those things. And if you standardize that and provide it as a service, hey, they can move at whatever velocity they want. That's a big argument I've heard in a lot of organizations is, oh, I have to control the CI/CD pipeline because I got to set the velocity. And it's like, no, I'll set up the standardization and automation. And if you want to push code every hour, I'll set up the velocity to be able to do that. If you want to push it once a year, you can do that. Like, I don't care, but we'll automate that. And so this isn't a tool set that typically the security professional is intimately involved in, or they're having to hire DevSecOps guys. Like, this has got to be in your arsenal. And then rethinking your visualization. I sat on the advisory board of Palo Alto Networks for a long time. And I remember when they're saying, hey, we're going to start getting rid of PCAP because there's really no value in it. In like the room, half the people in the room just lost their minds over the fact that they're doing it. But it was like, no, I totally get it. Number one, when TLS 1.3 comes out, packet capture is irrelevant to you. You're just not going to see it, right? The packet's hidden from you. That's the whole point. And so there's other tools that are coming out there that like plug into your APMs, your application performance monitors, watches the pipeline flow, watches the business flow, and it'll say, hey, you got to have an abnormality here. Something's working outside your automation. It's probably bad. There's tools out there that are starting to take advantage of it and put the security paradigm on its head. It's really important. And to give you another example near and dear to my heart is like the very first security tool that AWS released was WAF for the cloud. And it's like, okay, why would we do that? Because WAF, number one, is a network solution to an application problem. Hey, I've got bad code that is vulnerable to SQL injection or whatever. So we put something in the network layer to stop it. There's much better solutions out there for, Previty, contrast security, where it actually goes, no, I'm going to shim the jar file and tell the developer to go fix the problem. That's the better solution. So why are we bringing our data center tools to the cloud? We're going to have to think through new paradigms, right? And what I'm saying to, my CISO, and if I were still being a CISO, it's the same thing I would say, right, is we have to lead the revolution to the cloud, right? We can't sit back and be passive spectators as it happens. We got to be square in the middle of it and bring them along, because we'll help them set it up right. Just like the reason we can raise the speed limit on the highway is because we've invented anti-lock brakes and airbags and really good seat belts. CISO should be thinking about, how can I drive that security and innovation into the cloud so we can go faster? So kind of to sum it up, what are the things that you need to help your org consider, right? And what should you be considering? And I'd say, number one, feed it forward agility. I think a lot of times as technology professionals and security professionals, sometimes we forget why we're here. We're here to drive the business, right? And so, a lot of companies died during the black swan event of COVID because they couldn't adapt fast enough. You need to help your company be able to adapt and to be resilient when they encounter attack. And so it's super important that you drive that. Continuous goal, right? Alignment is continuous, not episodic. Like, it's not one and done with the cloud. Again, I'll remind you that Kubernetes just came out 5 or 6 years ago. And so, and now it's something that, of course I would be doing that if I were a cloud journey, right? And so, it's a continuous improvement process all the time. And just like security, you need to keep this in mind, that it's an evergreen process. Make cloud first, the developer, start pulling the people out of the data center. Hey, we're not going to land anything in the data center from this date forward. Everything goes cloud. And you got to do a talent transformation. It's just like when, the internet first came out. I remember, hooking up our things, BGP hadn't been embedded, everything was nascent. Hey, you got to keep on developing and investing in your talent. And again, network becomes less important. cloud and applications become more important. And that's not usually where the security professionals started out. A lot of them started out in the network space. They're going to have to learn application principles, SRE, those type of things. And if you haven't bought your team the Phoenix Project and the SRE principles book from O'Reilly, you probably need to consider it, right? Experimentation. You're going to have to come up with ways that people can experiment. In that way, we can do rapid development, rapid customer, experiences and stuff like that. So how do you help secure that experimentation and encourage it? And how do you encourage it in your own security team without dropping your guard? And then lastly, again, predict the power requirements for a new generation of cloud AI. There are so many new emerging technologies that are starting to be developed because of the democratization of GPU power, that it's really important you start looking and asking your security vendors, so what are you guys doing in this space and where do you see the market going, and follow it. Like I said, there's some amazing new tools coming out that looks at sentiment, user behavior awareness, all those things that just become really important as you go forward. So again, what I would encourage you to do is really lean into this experience. Help your company make this journey. In fact, if they haven't started, start thinking about leading the journey yourself, because it's where everything is going. And so that being said, I wanted to leave some time for Q&A. And so if you have any questions, you can always DM me on Twitter at Scott Howitt, and I'm open to any questions that we have.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. It looks like we have a few questions. I have Vincent said, would love to know how McAfee has approached internal security posture in the light of recent supply chain incidents.
Yeah, I think it forced all the security software manufacturers to reconsider how, again, back to the beauty of building a standardized CI/CD pipeline. That means I get standardized code signatures. I get all those things built right into the process. In that way, it helps make sure that we don't have those side channel or supply chain type attacks that get injected into our code. And again, too, relentless education on the developers of, hey, like open source is great, but you have to be judicious in how you use it. And again, code scanning, user reviews, all that, very important in what you do.
I have Ronald said the one thing I've not heard about today is ransomware and how to defend users and networks. That's my greatest fear. Backup help, but the prevention is what I want to hear about. Probably that's a big that's a big question.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. I'd see number one, the things that you do have in cloud that are a little harder to do in data center is immutable backups. Right. There's a lot of good cloud vendors out there that do that. And so looking through your resiliency plan and saying, okay, what data sources should I create immutable backups in? I think too, you do have to be a lot more resilient about when I build a workload, it should only exist for its useful life, and then it needs to go away. And so that also means, for example, if something ransomwares up a business processee or whatever, hey, that's fine. I'll just tear it down and go back to last known good. You don't typically have that ability in your data centers. So you really are going to have to think about, how do I modernize my applications? And when I can't modernize them to that point where I don't care if something goes bad because I'll just burn it down and go back to last known good, then, again, having those immutable data sources and stuff like that, where that, hey, nothing, you might encrypt my live data source, but my backup you can't, really important. And so something that every organization should be thinking about.
We had one other question that said, excellent journey. How does the targeted savings bank, How does the targeted savings bank look like?
Yeah, it actually looks really good because, back in our journey of, hey, we had 100,000 workloads, suddenly we're already down to like 60, and we'll probably have even less when we go forward. So we're just starting to turn off compute that we're not using. There is a little bit of a cultural change, though, that you certainly have to anticipate. The one good example I would give is, again, all my lab owners is where I'm having some cultural challenges right now. Well, I want my lab whenever I want it. And it's like, I can actually give it to you whenever I want it, like at a push of a button. If you give me the requirements in that, we can do that. But if you haven't been using that lab space for 2 hours, I'm just going to burn it down again. Right. And so it's really getting them out of the mindset of, I have to have my servers and all that available to me whenever, at any time. It's like, I can give it to you in almost real time, but they're just not going to be sitting there for you, running idle, waiting for you to use them. When things go idle, they go off. And it's a tough journey. You have to be thoughtful about it, but the cost savings are real and they're there.
I have one more question before we get to the end of the hour. James said, curious how the initial transaction you mentioned in the beginning of your very well done discussion looks approximately.
Yeah, like I said, back to its continuous journey. If I look at a year and a half into it, we've had some great victories, right? We've shut down 3 or 4 of the data centers that we planned on closing. We've moved some workloads out to the cloud. We're in the midst of some very big moves right now, but we've tripped and skinned our knee along the way as well a couple times. And that's the thing is, the executive team was very well informed of, hey guys, as we go through this journey, we'll make some mistakes. And I need everybody to keep the faith. And I need us to not punish the people that, as they're experimenting, make mistakes, because that's not how we're going to get to the end game. And so I've had great support by my executive team, and there's a lot of enthusiasm around it. And even some of the hardcore stickler guys who are like, I'll never get out of the data center, are rethinking how they do the move forward.
Well, that's excellent advice. And many of our leaders like you say the same thing. And as I've seen and heard, there's going to be lots of mistakes because that's just the industry we're in, but there's lots of great things happening as well. So
for sure. Yeah, we've seen innovation on a scale that we've never seen it before. It's really an exciting time to be in IT and security.
Yep, it is for sure. So thank you, Scott Howitt from McAfee. Thank you for being here today. And if anybody needs to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, just DM me on Twitter or hook up with me on LinkedIn, either way.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.